when he was down, I would try and bring him back up. When I was down, I know he brought me back up. It kept me sane. Kept pushing me to not to give in, and because at times you just feel like giving in. If I hadn't have been put in with Sandy, I don't think I'd be sitting here now. In fact, I know that.
The fact I was helping to care for someone again gave me inner strength. It gave me a purpose in life. And even though I was expecting to be beheaded at any time, I thought, well, at least I could help somebody before I go.
Over the next year, the two men got into a routine. Books, games, conversation, and for Sandy, prayers helped.
We discovered each other's weaknesses and strengths, and were able to draw on each other's strength. We're allowed games, jigsaws, Scrabble. Leslie would cheat at Scrabble a lot, but so would I when I could get away with it. But we bonded well together.
Back in Britain, Sandy's family felt helpless. Letters to his sister Margaret were few and far between. They were censored and contained little or no real news. Margaret had managed to get Sandy's wife and son out of Saudi Arabia at her own expense. They were all told by the Foreign Office to play a waiting game. But after 2 years, Margaret wanted less waiting and more action. She publicly criticised the government, demanding they get tough with Saudi and get her brother home to his family. But it was to be world events and not the Foreign Office that had an impact on Sandy and the others. September 11. The war against Iraq, and then May's bomb attack on a western compound in Riyadh meant the Saudis had to admit terrorists were at work in the kingdom.
We'd heard about the suicide bombings, and it exposed what was really going on in the kingdom, because before the Ministry of Interior was denying there was any Al-Qaeda networks in the kingdom. They were denying any internal problems. So as tragic as that suicide bombing was, it forced the authorities to open their eyes and admit the problems that they have.
Then a month ago, the surprise news that Sandy, Les and the others jailed for the bombings were being released from prison in Saudi. But his sister Margaret had had it all before. There had been lots of false alarms and false hopes. Even as she waited at Heathrow Airport, there was a fear Sandy was being left behind.
We were taken to a suite away from the main airport, and in the corner there was a television. And the news had broke, the men were on their way home, and all the men's name came up on the listing of who was being released, except Sandy's. And that was always my deepest fear, or one of my deepest fears, that they would let everybody go, but they would hold him back. And I tried to stop the panic, which was welling up inside.
But Sandy was on the plane, a free man back in the arms of his family.
It felt like forever before he actually spotted us, and he gave me such a big hug. And I broke the hug because Matthew and Noy were to the side of me, and I just said, "Look who I brought to see you." And Matthew hid from behind his mum's legs, and he was sort of peeping round. And I had real fears that there'd been too much distance between Matthew and his daddy, and how were they going to bridge that huge gap? And Sandy gave Noy a cuddle, and there were tears, and he got down on his knees by Matthew, who was looking at him very strangely, and he just tickled his tummy, and the years just disappeared, and it was the best thing. They were on the floor behaving like a pair of 2-year-olds, and it was just wonderful.
Until I actually picked up my son, it was still unreal to me. When I last saw my son, he was 2 years old, a little fat bundle, and now he was huge.
Now Sandy has to catch up on the lost years. But you can't just flick a switch and change from Sandy Mitchell, prisoner and torture victim, to Sandy Mitchell, father and family man. Too much has gone on.
Some of the acts they did to him went past barbaric. I didn't know people could be so cruel. Some things he can't talk about with other people, and I don't know why he told me. Part of me wishes he didn't, because it's a huge thing to carry within yourself.
There was some days which were worse than others. There was a few personal incidents which I found very upsetting, and I just don't feel strong enough to speak about it at this stage. Perhaps in the future I can talk about it, but I'm just not strong enough to talk about it now.
He wakes up screaming in the night. I've never heard screams like it. It wakes the entire household. And what's going through his head? What causes those screams?
Matthew, my son, frequently asks my wife, "Mummy, why is Daddy crying? What's wrong with Daddy?" How do you explain that to a 4-year-old?
And there are always unsettling reminders of the life he left behind in a cell where the lights were never turned off.
The first night he came home, he came out of the kitchen and I just said to him, "Oh, turn the light out." Such a simple little request. Turn the light out. How many times have we said it? And the look of horror and confusion on his face. To turn the light out?
One time I was in the shop about a week ago, and the lady who was serving my wife, she spoke very sharply, but not offensively, but I took it the wrong way. And I just started to fall about emotionally. I was shaking, I was about to cry, and so we just had to leave the shop. I cannot, at this stage of my life, I cannot deal with confrontations. And I know to my son, I must look like a very weak man, but I wasn't that way before. And hopefully I will recover and I can be the strong man that I should have been for my son and for my wife.
Back in Britain with no money or possessions, Sandy is struggling. He has to find a job and a home. Tasks like claiming benefits have been a confusing minefield. There's been very little official help. But last week, Sandy and Les Walker were invited to the London headquarters of the Medical Foundation, which cares for victims of torture. Physical and psychological scars were examined and will be treated. But what both men want above all else is to clear their names. Privately, the British government acknowledges that the men didn't commit a crime. Now they want a public apology from the Saudi authorities.
It distresses me that people can believe that or would even think that I'm capable of doing something like that. I'm a loving father. I saved lives. I don't take lives. It still upsets me now, the fact that even if there's just one person out there that thinks that I'm guilty, I find that disturbing. I have nightmares, I have flashbacks, but at the end of the day, we must also consider an innocent man was murdered out there. Christopher Rodway was murdered, and the authorities, rather than investigate what had happened, they just wanted confessions and to wrap up the case.
To people who don't know you, the question that they'll be asking is, Why would an innocent man confess to a crime, such a serious crime, if he didn't commit it? Why did you?
When you've been treated like I was treated, and then when they say to you, right, we're going to send a car now to collect your wife. She's a Filipino. We can do what we want with her. And we'll put her in the next room. All sorts of things go through your brain. You don't want that. No, I'll sign anything. I'll say anything. Don't go and collect my wife. It's got nothing to do with her. It's got nothing to do with me. But I'll admit it. Don't come and collect my wife.
You felt you had no choice but to sign that confession.
Would you? It's my wife. I don't want anybody to get hold of my wife and do what they can do to people. The sadists. Wicked.
Can you forgive them?
Those two? No. Never. I don't, not now. Ask me again in a few months or a year or two's time maybe, but I can't see it at the moment. No way.
And what of the Saudi government in all this? After all, the men were given royal clemency, released, not pardoned, and officially still guilty of the crimes they confessed to. All they'll say is that Saudi Arabia abides by international law and torture isn't allowed.
Those people have ruined my brother's life. And not only have they ruined his life, in a little way they've ruined my life. And that ripple goes on through my children and friends and family. I don't think we'll ever feel safe again. Anywhere. I'll never forgive them. They've stolen my brother away from me.
I know, my life is completely ruined. We have no home, so I have to stay with my sister. Everything I had has been taken from me. So it's a building state. It's a building process now. I have to try and get my life together for the sake of my family as well as myself. I have to try and be strong, but I'm not as strong as I once was, emotionally and physically. I don't know if I'll ever be that strong again, but I know I have to make that effort for my son. He needs a father he can look up to, be proud of, who could guide him through life. I hope I can be that person for him.